Think you know the whole story? Turns out you were probably taught the half-truth. Welcome to Half-Truths. You know the ritual. You have just finished a meal that was likely heavy on the soy sauce and perhaps a bit too generous with the oil. You are full, maybe pleasantly so, maybe regretfully so. The waiter clears the plates, stacking them high on a tray, and then returns one last time. He places the check on the table. And on top of that slip of paper, or perhaps resting in a small plastic bowl, sit the cookies. They are golden, folded into that peculiar shape that defies distinct geometric description. A Pac-Man, a crescent moon, a pair of hugging arms. You grab one. It is wrapped in clear, crinkly plastic. You tear it open. The smell is specific. It smells of vanilla, sugar, and distinctively processed flour. It is the smell of an American childhood. You crack it open. It snaps with a satisfying, dry crunch. You ignore the cookie for a second to fish out the little slip of paper. You read your future. Maybe it is a vague aphorism about success. Maybe it is a string of lucky numbers that you swear you will play in the lottery but never do. Then you eat the cookie. It is dry, sweet, and disappears in 2 bites. This is the fortune cookie. It is the punctuation mark of the Chinese-American dining experience. It is as expected as the chopsticks and the tea. It feels ancient. When you hold that little slip of paper, you feel a faint, simplified connection to Eastern philosophy. You imagine this tradition stretching back to the Ming Dynasty, passed down through generations of bakers in misty provinces, bringing a touch of Confucian wisdom to your dinner in suburban Ohio or downtown Manhattan. It is a comforting thought. It suggests a continuity of culture. It suggests that even in our fast food world, we are participating in a ritual that has crossed oceans and centuries to land on our table. We accept the fortune cookie as the quintessential Chinese artifact. But here is the record scratch. Here is the moment where the story you know hits a wall. If you were to board a plane right now, fly 16 hours to Beijing, walk into a local restaurant, and ask for a fortune cookie, you would be met with absolute confusion. They would not know what you are talking about. You might show them a picture on your phone, and they would look at you like you were asking for a slice of pizza at a sushi bar. Because the fortune cookie is not Chinese. It never was. In fact, for a long time, the only place you could find fortune cookies in China was in Hong Kong, sold as genuine American cuisine. So, if this crunchy, sugary staple of Chinese culture does not come from China, where does it come from? And how did a simple cookie pull off one of the greatest identity thefts in culinary history? Welcome to Half-Truths. Today, we are going to unravel the paper slip, look past the lucky numbers, and discover that the fortune cookie is actually a story about Japanese immigrants, Californian rivalry, and a world war that forced a cultural swap that we are only just beginning to remember. Let us start by looking at the story we have told ourselves. The myth of the Chinese fortune cookie is powerful because it fits so neatly into our understanding of the Chinese-American experience. In the popular imagination, the cookie is linked to the 13th and 14th centuries. There is a legend, often repeated in tour guidebooks and on placemats, about the Moon Festival. The story goes that during the Mongol rule of China, revolutionaries wanted to overthrow the invaders. To coordinate their uprising without being detected, they hid messages inside mooncakes, a dense, lotus-based pastry. The messages told the people to revolt on the 15th of the 8th lunar month. The uprising was successful. The Ming Dynasty was born, and the tradition of hiding messages in cakes was established. It is a fantastic story. It has spice, revolution, and pastry. It gives the fortune cookie a heroic, patriotic lineage. It anchors the silly little dessert in a moment of great historical gravity. And while the mooncake legend is a real piece of folklore, connecting it to the modern, vanilla-flavored, crescent-shaped fortune cookie is a complete fabrication. It is a retrospective attempt to give meaning to a product that had none. The reality of the fortune cookie's ubiquity is much more about marketing than Ming Dynasty rebels. By the mid-20th century, the cookie had become the standard closer for Chinese restaurants across the United States. It was the perfect low-cost dessert. It was shelf-stable. It was cheap. It provided a tiny moment of entertainment. Americans expect dessert. In traditional Chinese dining, dessert is not the same structured course it is in the West. You might have fruit or a sweet soup, but not a cake or a cookie. The fortune cookie filled a cultural gap. It bridged the divide between the Chinese meal and the American expectation of a sweet finish. But to find the real origin, we have to leave the Chinese restaurant entirely. We have to leave the idea of China entirely. We need to travel geographically to Japan, and specifically to the ancient city of Kyoto. If you visit the Fushimi Inari Taisha Shrine in Kyoto, the famous one with thousands of bright orange gates winding up the mountain, and you look closely at the old family bakeries surrounding the shrine, you will see something familiar. They are grilling crackers over a flame in handheld iron molds. These crackers are folded. They are a dark brownish color. And tucked inside the fold, visible but not quite hidden, is a piece of paper. These are called Sujiura senbei, and they are the great-grandfathers of the fortune cookie. The visual evidence is undeniable. We have woodblock prints and literature from the 19th century in Japan that depict these exact cookies. A character in a story from 1878 creates these crackers, complete with the fortune slips, to mediate misunderstandings between people. The shape is the same, though usually a bit larger. The concept of the paper fortune is the same. The connection is absolute. But there are key differences. The Japanese Sujiura senbei is not made with vanilla and butter. It is made with sesame and miso. It is savory, dark, and nutty. The fortune is not tucked inside the hollow center. It is pinched in the fold on the outside. This is a practical design choice to ensure you do not accidentally eat the paper, a mistake many first-time American diners have made with the modern version. So we have a Japanese cracker that looks like a fortune cookie. How did it get to America, and how did it turn into a Chinese icon? This is where the story moves to California. The turn of the 20th century. San Francisco and Los Angeles were booming, chaotic cities, and they were the primary entry points for Asian immigrants. There are two main claimants to the throne of the American fortune cookie, and the dispute between them is as heated as any corporate lawsuit. In one corner, we have Makoto Hagiwara. He was a Japanese landscape architect and the caretaker of the beautiful Japanese tea garden in San Francisco's Golden Gate Park. The story goes that around 1914, Hagiwara began serving these cookies with tea at the garden. He had reportedly been fired by a racist mayor and then later reinstated, and he wanted to offer a gesture of thanks and good fortune to those who had stood by him. He commissioned a local Japanese bakery, Kyoto, to produce a sweetened version of the Sujiura senbei. He changed the recipe to appeal to American tastes, swapping the savory miso for vanilla and sugar, and placed the note inside. In the other corner, we have David Jung, the founder of the Hong Kong Noodle Company in Los Angeles. His claim dates to around 1918. The story here is that Jung, seeing the poor and homeless wandering near his shop, created the cookie with inspirational Bible scriptures inside to uplift their spirits. He claims to have invented the folded shape and the concept entirely on his own. For decades, this was a he said, she said historical debate: San Francisco versus Los Angeles, Japanese versus Chinese. In 1983, the Court of Historical Review in San Francisco actually held a mock trial to settle the matter. They looked at the evidence, they looked at the grilling irons, they looked at the family histories, and the judge, a San Francisco native, ruled in favor of San Francisco and Makoto Hagiwara. While the court was whimsical and not legally binding, historical research backs this up. The grilling irons used by the Hagiwara family were identical to the ones used in Kyoto. The link is direct. So, up until the 1930s, the fortune cookie was known in California as a fortune tea cake, and it was associated with Japanese-American bakeries. If you wanted a fortune cookie, you went to a Japanese confectionery. So how did the switch happen? How did a Japanese tea cake become the exclusive property of Chinese restaurants? The answer lies in one of the darkest chapters of American history. It is 1941. The Japanese military attacks Pearl Harbor. The United States enters World War II. Anti-Japanese sentiment in America explodes. It is visceral, racist, and all-encompassing. In February 1942, President Franklin D. Roosevelt signed Executive Order 9066. This order authorized the forced removal and incarceration of over 120,000 people of Japanese ancestry, most of whom were American citizens living on the West Coast. Overnight, Japanese neighborhoods were emptied. Businesses were shuttered. Families were given days to pack what they could carry before being shipped off to desolate internment camps in the interior of the country. Among those detained were the Japanese bakers who made the fortune tea cakes. The bakeries that supplied the cookies to the West Coast were closed down. The Hagiwara family was forced out of the Japanese tea garden. They lost everything. But the demand for the cookies did not disappear. By this time, the cookies had become popular. Chinese restaurant owners had begun buying them from Japanese bakers because they were a cheap, crowd-pleasing dessert that Americans enjoyed. With the Japanese bakers imprisoned, a vacuum opened in the market. Entrepreneurial Chinese businessmen saw the opportunity. They had the restaurants, they had the demand, and now they had no suppliers, so they began to manufacture the cookies themselves. They bought the molds, they learned the technique. Some even bought the equipment for pennies on the dollar from Japanese families desperate to liquidate their assets before being sent to the camps. During the war, while Japanese Americans were behind barbed wire, the fortune tea cake became the fortune cookie. The association with Japan was erased, partly out of necessity and partly out of the rampant anti-Japanese patriotism of the time. Chinese restaurant owners were happy to claim the cookie. It was profitable, and it distinguished their restaurants. When the war ended and the Japanese Americans were released, they returned to a world that had moved on. The market for fortune cookies was now dominated by Chinese manufacturers. The narrative had set like concrete. The cookie was Chinese. Attempting to reclaim it was financially and culturally impossible. The Japanese bakers moved on to other things, and the Sujiura senbei remained a niche tradition in Kyoto, completely disconnected from its booming American cousin. This takeover was cemented by the invention of the automatic fortune cookie machine. In the late 1960s and early 70s, machines were developed that could fold the cookies automatically. This caused the price to drop significantly, making them accessible to even the smallest takeout joint. The leading manufacturer became Wonton Food Inc., a Chinese-American company based in New York. They grew to produce millions of cookies a day. The cultural assimilation was so complete that Wonton Food tried to introduce fortune cookies to China in the early 1990s. They marketed them as genuine American fortune cookies. They failed miserably. The Chinese consumers found them too dry, too sweet, and weirdly superstitious. They did not understand why you would put paper inside food. The product was pulled from the shelves. It remains one of the few examples of a Chinese product that China explicitly rejected. It is fascinating to pull this thread because it reveals how fluid authenticity really is. We tend to think of ethnic cuisine as a static museum piece. This is how they eat in Italy, this is how they eat in China. But food is a technology. It travels, it adapts, it gets stolen, borrowed, and remixed. The fortune cookie is the ultimate immigrant story. It was invented by Japanese immigrants trying to adapt a Kyoto tradition to the American palate. It was sustained by Chinese immigrants trying to survive and thrive in a competitive restaurant market. And it was consumed by Americans who wanted a taste of the exotic East, but really just wanted a sugar cookie with a side of validation. The irony is thick. The slip of paper inside the cookie usually offers a platitude about destiny or luck. But the history of the cookie itself proves that luck is often just a matter of who is left standing when the dust settles. The Japanese bakers had bad luck. The Chinese restaurateurs had good timing. And we, the consumers, simply accepted the story that was presented to us because it tasted good. There is another layer to the modern fortune cookie that is worth noting: the numbers. You know the string of lucky numbers on the back of the fortune? They have actually changed lives. In 2005, there was a panic at the Powerball lottery headquarters. Usually, there are only a handful of second-place winners, but in this specific drawing, 110 people came forward with the winning numbers. The lottery officials suspected fraud. They suspected a hacking of the system. When they interviewed the winners, they found the common denominator. They had all eaten at Chinese restaurants. They had all received fortune cookies made by Wonton Food. The factory had printed a series of lucky numbers that happened to match the Powerball draw. It was a statistical anomaly that cost the lottery nearly $20 million. It is a testament to how deeply ingrained this fake tradition is in our lives. We trust the cookie. We play the numbers. So, where does this leave us? When you crack open that cookie, you are not engaging in an ancient Chinese ritual. You are participating in a uniquely American ritual. You are eating a Japanese innovation, saved by Chinese enterprise, shaped by World War II, and mass-produced by modern machinery. It is a symbol of the melting pot, but not the sanitized version we learn in school. It is the melting pot that involves racism, internment, economic opportunism, and the messy, complicated struggle of different groups trying to make a living in a new land. The fortune cookie is a lie, yes. It is not Chinese, but in a way, it is more honest than if it were. If it were truly an import from the Ming Dynasty, it would just be a foreign object. But as a Japanese-American invention co-opted by Chinese-American culture, it is a perfect reflection of the American experience. It is a hodgepodge of history, rebranded for mass consumption. Next time you are at a Chinese restaurant, look at that golden crescent. Think about the baker in Kyoto grilling miso crackers over a charcoal fire. Think about Makoto Hagiwara in the Golden Gate Park, trying to sweeten his return to society. Think about the families packing their bags in 1942. And think about the Chinese business owners who kept the ovens running. Read the fortune. Laugh at the vague prophecy. Eat the cookie. It might not taste like ancient wisdom, and it certainly doesn't taste like China. It tastes like history. Complicated, bittersweet, and entirely man-made, the story isn't about what is written on the paper. The story is the paper itself, and the strange, winding journey it took to get to your plate. Now you know the real story. What other half-truths are still out there? If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, leave a comment, and join us next time. Until then, stay curious.